Hello, Sarah of SEK Handmade here, and welcome to Swatch and Learn, where we'll be slowing down and creating swatches with the simple purpose of learning. I am so excited for today's episode. I can't wait to work up some swatches and learn right along with you. This is episode number 1, and today we'll be using one type of worsted weight yarn and 3 sizes of crochet hooks. Let's go. All right, before we dive into making our swatches, first I want to talk about the supplies that you're going to need if you wish to work right along with me, as well as the stitch that we will be working with. I decided that for this first episode, we would be using one type of yarn and 3 different hook sizes. So what we're going to be comparing then is how the size of hook affects the fabric that we stitch up. So I have here, you can see, I've chosen Brava worsted weight yarn for my swatches. I love Brava yarn. It is a really nice middle of the road worsted weight yarn. I feel worsted weight can really vary from kind of thin, almost DK, all the way to a plumper, more kind of Aran weight. And I feel like Brava is a really nice middle of the road. I also like to swatch with it because it can be frogged and reused again if I choose to. So it really holds up well. It also gives nice stitch definition, which is always just a pleasant bonus. You can use whatever worsted weight yarn you choose. If you're going to try these 3 hook sizes, I do recommend a worsted weight yarn, but this could really be done as an experiment with one type of yarn and 3 hook sizes for any weight yarn and any hook sizes. So this whole thing is all about your learning and what you want to do, so you can be flexible. No need to feel like there are hard and fast rules here with this. I have chosen, you can see, I'm going to do my swatches in 3 different colors. I do want to warn you to be a little careful when you get out yarn if you're using the same yarn but in different colors, or scraps of the same yarn in different colors. Sometimes, from my understanding, it's the dye that's used that can affect the weight of the yarn for whatever reason. So just look at it carefully and see if they're all about the same weight of yarn. It's gonna affect your final result if one of your yarns is really a thick worsted and one of your yarns is a really thin worsted. So just something to think about. Again though, no hard and fast rules here, so whatever you want to do to try your swatches. I have also chosen my 3 hook sizes here. We're going to use, if you're going to follow along with me exactly, again, you don't have to, we're going to use a USG 6, which is a 4mm hook, a USI 9, which is a 5.5mm hook, and a US L11, which is an 8mm hook. I will warn you that US indications, the letters, can vary a little bit. So I usually try to look at the millimeter size to make sure I've got the right size hook when I'm working on that. Streamline this can be flexible. I chose these 3 hooks because they're all 3 made out of wood. I tried to find 3 streamline hooks, but I did not have the 5mm in a streamline. But I do think, or I know from experience, that changing the material that your hook is can definitely change the type of fabric you get. So I wanted to be really scientific and consistent. So all 3 of my hooks are made from wood. We are going to be working with the half ring stitch today. I'm going to show you the half ring stitch. This is not, however, meant to be a complete tutorial. I have a complete tutorial of this stitch on my channel, and I will link to it in the description below if you want to pause here and go take a look at that video so that you can have a really firm understanding before you get started. Just click the link in the description. I want to share with you because, again, this is totally flexible. So you can make your swatch as big or as little as you want. The half ring stitch is worked over just one stitch. So the multiples for half ring stitch is 1 plus 1, or it could be 1 plus 2. Now, traditionally, a lot of people with half double crochets, which the half ring stitch is a variation on a half double crochet, they will chain 2 at the end of each row to move on to the next row. You'll see that the half ring stitch is a kind of a shortened version of a half double crochet, and so you may choose to only chain 1. So my point being that if you choose to chain 1 at the end or beginning of each row, the half ring stitch is going to be however many chains you want for your half ring stitches plus 1. If you like to chain 2 at the beginning of each row for half double crochets, and really you can try either way and see what works best for you. If you're going to chain 2, then you're going to decide how many half double crochet half ring stitches you want, and you're going to add 2 to that. All right, for my first swatch, I'm going to choose the middle of the road hook. So the I-9, which is a 5.5 millimeter hook. I'm choosing this simply because I feel like it's the most, what would be considered appropriate hook for the yarn weight that we're using. And I find a lot of times that's a good place to start when you're trying something new. So I'm gonna use my gray yarn here. And if you remember, our half ring stitch, which is what we're gonna be working with today, is a multiple of 1 plus 1 or 2, depending on how many chains you prefer when you're working half double crochets. Now, you don't need a super long tail here at the beginning because this is just a swatch, and you're either going to take it apart or keep it for reference. So it's not something that you need to work a super long tail with. So I'm going to, just out of kind of randomness and the fact that I like even numbers, I'm gonna chain 16 plus 1 because I tend to do 1 chain at the start of my rows with half double crochets. So let's see how many I have here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 for my 16 stitches, and an extra 1 for my chain because I like to chain 1. And then you'll notice maybe that I also like to work into the back bump of my stitches, and that's just this little ridge here. You can work into your chains however you want, not a big deal. So for the half ring stitch, again, full tutorial linked in the description below. Oh, I do want to mention, make your swatch whatever size you want. I do encourage you to go kind of middle of the road. If you want to see what a gigantic swatch looks like, go for it. But if you choose to do just a teeny tiny swatch, say maybe like half this size, your fabric is not probably going to be big enough to really make a good comparison. You want enough stitches that you kind of get into the stitches so that you can really see how it works up once you get going. So the number of chains you do is up to you and totally flexible. But I do encourage kind of a middle of the road so that you can make some comparison. So I'm going to, because I like a chain 1, I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the second chain from my hook. I'm going to pull up a loop, and then the half ring stitch is made by taking that loop that you just pulled up and pulling it through the other 2 loops on your hook. So you're just going to yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, pull through your other 2 loops. Get myself some more yarn here. And then I'm just going to work that all the way down my chain. And again, I'm working into the back loop, which is what I personally prefer, but totally up to you. So remember, if you are a person who prefers to chain 2 at the end of your round of half double crochets, and you want the same number of stitches in your swatch as I'm having in my swatch, you're going to do 16 plus 2 chains. So you will have 18. Yes, I can do simple math and crochet at the same time. So I'm just going to keep working that half ring stitch into my chain until I get all the way to the end. And if you're like me and you are a double checker, I'm just going to double check to make sure I have the 16 stitches that I wanted. Not that it's life or death here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yay. And then you're going to do what you normally do, whether you're a person who likes to chain 1 or a person who likes to chain 2 at the beginning of your rounds of half double crochet. I'm a chain 1er, so I'm just going to chain 1, turn, and here's the cool thing. Do you see that neat texture there, the little bumps? The half ring stitch puts a texture on the back side of your fabric, which we're going to do half ring stitch every single row here, so it's going to be on the front and the back. Do be careful, that bump creates kind of a little V here. That's not what you're working into. The top of your stitch is up here. So yarn over and work your half ring stitch into every stitch you have all the way back across your row. And if you are working along here with me, that's fantastic. What I'm going to do for those who just want to see what happens and aren't working along, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to speed up the video of me working this. I'm just going to keep working rows until I've got an approximate square of half ring stitches here. If you are swatching along with me, now would be a great time to pause. And in the description below, I have shared some things that you might be interested in watching while you do your swatch. And then we can meet back here when we have our swatches almost done. You saw me lay my swatch down several times while I was working my swatch. Your swatch can be as long or as short as you want it to be. I was kind of checking for a square-ish size here. Nothing magic about that. Just my organized brain likes the idea of that. So looking here, pull through my last stitch. I think that's the swatch I'm gonna have. So I'm going to clip my yarn. Again, it doesn't have to be a long tail, just enough to pull through that final stitch. And there you go. That is my first swatch. All right. Swatch and Learn is meant to be very flexible, but also if you're going to do true comparison, you do need to keep some things consistent to have a good comparison. So I've already said the thing that I'm changing about this round is my hook size. So for my next 2 swatches with the different hook size, I'm going to use the same yarn in a different color that I've already pre-checked to make sure that their weight is the same, because you know that can be a little funny sometimes. And then I'm going to count the number of rows that I have so that I can have the same number of stitches and the same number of rows in all of my swatches, so that then I can compare them equally. So if you have your starting tail on the right side here, this first bump here is your first row. So I'm going to count by 2 after each bump, if that makes sense, because I find it easier to count evens than odds. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 rows. I did 18 rows to get my square-ish here. So I'm going to work my next swatch with 16 stitches and 18 rows so that I can compare them. For my second swatch, I'm using the same type of yarn. This is also Brava worsted, just in a different colorway, but still is very much the same weight as the first colorway that I used. Got to check that because sometimes they can vary somewhat significantly. And because my factor that I want to compare is how the different hook size affects the swatch, I want to keep everything else the same. So the yarn is the same, and I'm going to keep the number of stitches that I do and the number of rows that I do the same, so that we can have a really equal comparison. All right, I wish I could count and talk, but I cannot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, so close. 15, 16. So I'm going to do 16 stitches, and then I'm going to add my chain 1 because that's my preference. Feel free to do 18 chains and have your chain 2 at the beginning, totally your own preference. I'm going to do my half ring stitch, and let me tell you, I can already tell that the smaller loops created by the smaller hook if nothing else, they feel different to work. So that's another interesting part of doing these swatches one right after another. Of course, if this bothers your hands to do a lot of crocheting like this in a row, feel free to take a break or do them, on different evenings. I'd love to hear what you think of doing all 3 though, because I will confess that doing these in a row, I did not expect to feel the difference in hook size like I very clearly can with the smaller hook as compared to the eye hook from before. It just makes everything a little tighter because the size of the hook determines the size of the stitches, or I should say partially determines the size of the stitches. All right, so you can already see the difference in width there. That's 16 stitches as compared to my first swatch. We'll compare them all at the end. I'm gonna go ahead and work 18 rows total so that it matches my other swatch. Tell you, I am already feeling, I don't know the exact time. I did not time myself, and I don't think that's what's important here. But I will say something that I have noticed is that this swatch felt like it took longer than my first swatch. And it was the exact same number of stitches. Now, exact same number of stitches doesn't necessarily mean it takes the exact same amount of time. I don't know if you noticed while I was working, I was having more trouble when I pulled my first loop through my other two loops. This whole swatch, I was having more trouble not snagging the other yarn on my way through. So it takes a little more of a deliberate movement there. One last stitch. All right, I'm gonna double check my row count. Pretty sure I'm good to go here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Yep, so I have my, just like my last swatch, whoops, I have my 16 stitches and my 18 rows. All right, one last swatch to go. My third swatch, I am going to move up to my USL hook, which it should be an 8mm, and I'm gonna do the same thing that I've done for the other two swatches. Make my slip knot, chain my 17, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then again, I'm just going to place my half ring stitch in my second chain from my hook and go ahead and work down the row. I think you'll see when we get to the end of this row, whoops, skipped over a chain there. I think you'll see when we get to the end of this row that this swatch is going to be quite a bit bigger than our second swatch for sure, and bigger than our first swatch too. So just keep working down the row. It is an interesting feeling using the same number of stitches but doing different size stitches, how they feel different as far as how long it takes, even though it's the exact same number of stitches. All right, so that's our first row of stitches. So I'm gonna fly through the rest of them and meet you back here when this swatch is done too. Again, I'm going to be doing 16 stitches and 18 rows. Last row of my final swatch here. Now, if you were watching, you could see that I had a bit of a harder time with using the big hook with the lighter weight yarn. It tended to slip out from my hook a little more. I mean, that could have been lots of things. But just something I noticed. I'd be curious to know if you had the same trouble. Leave me a comment below if I'm not alone. All right, last stitch. I'm gonna grab my scissors, just leave a little tail again. Doesn't need to be significant. Pull it through. And there is my swatch with the worsted weight yarn and the L 8mm hook. All right, friends, 3 hook sizes, 1 type of yarn, 3 swatches, and look at the difference. Let's start with comparing the size of these guys. If I line them up in the corners, you can see, and this is interesting to me, maybe just to me, you can see they kind of grow equal distance in width, but not in height. And I have to say, part of the reason, and this is speculation from experience, part of the reason I wonder if this one is more narrow, but almost as tall as the other swatch, which it is 1.5mm smaller hook size than my first swatch. I wonder if part of that is because I was having trouble pulling through my loops. If I was raising my first loop that I pull through up higher, that's called your golden loop, and when you lift that higher, it can increase your row height. So that could be that. So then if we look at texture, it's interesting to see the difference in texture. I think that the loop texture on this is a little more subtle than the other two. You can see that loop a little more, the ring part of it, a little more distinctly, I think, on the bigger two, which is interesting. And then obviously the stitch size is different. The larger the hook, the larger the stitch size, but also I don't know if you can tell, it also makes a difference in how porous the swatch is. The larger the hook, the more holes there are in the fabric. So this is a lighter fabric. This is kind of an in-between fabric. The holes are smaller. And this one is a really dense fabric. It's still, because it's crocheted, there's still some, you know, it's not completely without spaces between the stitches, but it is a more dense fabric. The other thing that I really notice about these is, if you look at my swatch with the smallest hook size, if you've done your own, you can feel this for yourself. But this is a much tighter fabric. When I fold it, look at how it holds its shape. Whatever shape I put it in, it holds it pretty well. It's a nice stiff fabric. Whereas when I do that, let's see, it loosens a little more. And when I do that, it loosens even more. You can see, I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know if you're gonna understand this or get the real feel of it without feeling the fabric yourself. So I hope you will stitch these up just out of curiosity, if nothing else. But this fabric definitely has more drape to it. This one kind of has in-between drape. You can see when I wiggle it like that, it still holds its shape pretty well, whereas this one kind of flops back and forth a little bit more. And then this guy, like not at all. He's pretty stiff. This fabric would be great for making something that you need more structure with, something like a basket, a bowl, a purse, or a bag. If you were looking for like a garment that has real structure to it, where you needed like a collar to stand up, or you were looking for something with sharp shoulders, a nice tight structured fabric like that would be great. This would be more of a middle of the road. It's going to hold some decent structure, but it's not going to be as stiff. And then if you were looking for a more drapey fabric, something like this much larger hook size would give you that. Now, the half ring stitch, because it's not even a full half double crochet as far as height goes, isn't going to probably give you a super drapey fabric, because it's a pretty short stitch, and the shorter the stitch, the more dense the fabric in my experience. So just so interesting to me. Those are our 3 swatches. Thank you so much for joining me today for episode 1 of Swatch and Learn. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I would love to know in the comments below if you got out your yarn and hooks and swatched right along with me, or if you watched and took all of your learning from seeing my swatches. I don't know about you, but it does help me to learn by doing things with my own hands. However, my memory cannot always be trusted to remember all of the things I learned. So I would encourage you, if you're like me, to maybe get yourself a little journal. This would be a great place to take some really simple notes. It doesn't have to be complicated. If it's too complicated for you to want to do it, you're never going to do it, and then it's not very helpful. But you could just grab a little inexpensive notebook and write in here what yarn you used, what hook sizes you used, what stitch we worked with today, and then just some little notes about things that you noticed and learned by working with the 3 different hook sizes like we did today. This would be a great reference for when you're picking yarn for a new project that you're going to start. Anything that you've noticed might help you make a decision on what the best yarn will be for that specific project that you're about to start. If you enjoyed swatching with me today, I would love it if you would like this video. It helps other people see it and swatch and learn right along with us. If you don't want to miss out on any episodes of Swatch and Learn, I would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on notifications. If you want to know ahead of time the supplies that you need for our next Swatch and Learn, there's a link in the description down below to join my email list, and I will send you out warnings so you can gather your supplies ahead of time. Thank you so much for joining me today, and happy crafting!